My mother-in-law slipped something strange into my drink when she thought I wasn't watching. A special mocktail for my favorite son-in-law, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I thanked her, but I wasn't taking any chances. I swapped glasses with her husband, who'd spent years belittling my career. 45 minutes later, he was doubled over, sick as a dog, and I knew I'd just escaped something sinister. My name's Ethan Carter, 32 years old, a freelance videographer based in Boulder, Colorado. I've built my career from scratch: documentaries, music festivals, corporate gigs. But to my in-laws, especially Margaret, I'll never be good enough. That night, I uncovered a web of manipulation so twisted it threatened to destroy my marriage. But I wasn't going down without a fight. Let's set the stage. I'd just come back from a grueling week-long shoot in the Rockies, filming a documentary on elk migration for a conservation group. My hands were still chapped from the wind, but I'd captured footage that would pay our rent for months. I was exhausted, ready to crash on the couch with a pizza, but my wife, Mia, insisted we couldn't miss her mom's birthday dinner. Just a few hours, she said, her voice soft but firm. I should have listened to the uneasy feeling in my gut when Margaret pulled me aside in the kitchen, her eyes darting nervously before she handed me that drink. The slight shake in her hands as she said, "I made this just for you," set off alarm bells. Something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong it would get. Mia and I met 7 years ago at a film festival in Denver, where I was screening a short documentary on sustainable farming. She was finishing her PhD in climate science, and I was just starting to make a name for myself. We clicked instantly. She got my need to tell stories through a camera, and I admired her dedication to saving the planet. We were a team, but her parents were a different story. From day one, Richard, her dad, made it clear he wanted someone else for his daughter, someone with a corner office, a 401k, and a luxury SUV. Richard was a hedge fund manager, the kind of guy who measured worth in portfolio growth and vacation homes. At every family dinner, he'd smirk and ask, "How's the little video hobby going?" Not even trying to hide his contempt. Margaret was sneakier. She'd compliment my work, then ask when I'd settle into something more secure. She'd invite me to their fancy gatherings in their upscale Boulder neighborhood, then introduce me as the videographer instead of her son-in-law. For years, I tried to win them over. I'd bring craft beer from local breweries, show them my published projects, name-drop clients like REI and Patagonia. Nothing worked. Last Thanksgiving, I overheard Margaret on the phone. Mia could have married Daniel, tech entrepreneur, trust fund, but she picked the artsy one. The way she said artsy made it sound like a curse. Richard was blunter. When Mia and I shared we were trying for a baby, he pulled me aside. "Kids are pricey, son. Maybe consider a real job before you start a family." I never told Mia these things. She adored her parents despite their flaws, and I didn't want to make her choose sides. So I smiled, shook Richard's hand at every visit, praised Margaret's cooking, and kept my frustration to myself. But there were signs I should have taken seriously. The way Margaret would pull Mia into the kitchen whenever I talked about a big project, cutting me off mid-sentence. How she'd accidentally leave me out of family photos at their annual 4th of July barbecue. The time Richard suggested Mia see a therapist for her reckless choices while staring right at me. I ignored it all, thinking time would soften them. I was wrong. The Friday of Margaret's birthday dinner, I got back from the Rockies, showered, put on a decent flannel, and drove us to their modern mountain-style home in the ritzy part of Boulder. Dinner started as usual. Richard bragged about a merger he'd brokered. Margaret fussed over the table settings with her vintage china, and Mia's brother Nathan and his wife Lauren made small talk about their new Tesla. I sipped a cider and counted the minutes until we could leave. After the main course, Margaret announced she'd made her famous lavender lemonade for dessert. She slipped into the kitchen, and I offered to help carry glasses, more to stretch my legs than anything else. That's when I saw it. She had two glasses set apart from the others. As I walked in, she quickly poured something from a tiny vial into one of them. Colorless, odorless, and she hid the vial the second she heard me. "Oh, Ethan, I've got this," she said, her voice too high-pitched. "This one's for you, a special recipe for my favorite son-in-law." My stomach twisted. The glass had a faint sheen on the surface, catching the light. "Let me help you carry these," I said, grabbing both glasses she'd prepared. Back in the dining room, Richard was scrolling his phone, barely glancing up as I approached. "Lemonade, sir." I set the tampered glass in front of him instead of keeping it for myself. I watched him take a big gulp, then made an excuse about sticking to water with my dessert. 45 minutes later, Richard was pale, sweating, and bolting to the bathroom. The sounds of him retching echoed through the house. Margaret's face went white as a sheet when she realized what had happened. Her eyes locked onto mine across the table, and I knew two things for sure. My mother-in-law had tried to sabotage me, and she knew I'd figured it out. I didn't react, didn't confront her. I just ate my slice of lemon cake while Mia ran to check on her dad. In the chaos that followed, Richard claiming it was food poisoning, Margaret mumbling about spoiled salmon, I quietly pocketed the untouched glass meant for me. Something shifted inside me. My anger wasn't loud or fiery. It was cold, calculated. I wasn't going to let this slide, but I wasn't going to play their game either. I'd make them face who they really were. Fat trien suhon, shungjot noitumba jutra. The Monday after the dinner, I took the glass to a friend, Marcus, a former client who ran a toxicology lab in Denver. "Personal or professional?" he asked when I told him what I needed. "Family matter," I replied. 3 days later, he called. "Ethan, there were sedatives in that drink, benzodiazepines. Not enough to kill, but enough to knock someone out for hours. Maybe mess with their memory. Where'd you get this?" I thanked him, asked for a written report, and didn't answer his question. That night, I told Mia I wanted to skip the weekly family dinners for a while, saying I needed to focus on an upcoming film project. She was disappointed but nodded. I didn't tell her about the lab results. Not yet. I needed more information. Over the next 2 weeks, I dug deep. Margaret had prescriptions for sedatives from 3 different doctors, clearly stockpiling pills. I also heard rumors around Boulder, odd behavior at a charity gala, whispers of her taking jewelry from a friend at their country club, stories her family had buried. I gathered everything and waited for the right moment. That moment came when Mia mentioned her mom wanted photos for a new charity campaign she was launching. "She specifically asked if you'd film a promo video," Mia said, surprised. I agreed. The following Saturday, I showed up at their house alone, camera bag in one hand, a sealed envelope in the other. Margaret was waiting, dressed in a designer blazer, her makeup flawless. "Richard was at the office," she said. "Before we start," I said calmly, "I thought you might want to see this." I handed her the envelope with the toxicology report and printouts of her overlapping prescriptions. Her hands shook as she read. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. "I would never—" "We both know what happened," I cut her off. "What I don't know is why." Her face hardened. "You're not good enough for my daughter. You never will be. A man should provide stability, not videos." "And drugging your daughter's husband provides stability?" I kept my voice steady. She snapped. "It wasn't going to hurt you, just make you miss that stupid film festival you've been going on about. Show Mia you're unreliable." I let that sink in. "Here's what happens next," I said. "You're going to tell Richard what you did. Then you're both going to start treating me with respect. Not because you've changed your minds about me, but because the alternative is Mia finding out exactly who her parents are." Margaret laughed, but it was hollow. "She'd never believe you over us." I picked up my camera bag. Maybe not, but she'll believe the lab report, the prescriptions, and the neighbors you've alienated. Are you willing to bet your relationship with your daughter on that? I left without filming a single frame. That night, Margaret called Mia in tears, claiming I'd been hostile during our meeting, saying I'd threatened her. When Mia confronted me, I couldn't hide the truth anymore. I showed her everything: the lab report, the prescriptions, even text messages from her mom that had grown increasingly hostile over the years. My mother wouldn't do this, she kept saying, but her voice wavered. The next day, she confronted her parents alone. When she came home, her eyes were red from crying. My dad says it's a misunderstanding, she said quietly, that you're trying to drive a wedge between us because you're insecure about your career. I nodded. I'd expected this. What do you think? I asked. She didn't answer, just crawled into bed and turned away from me. I'd pushed back, but somehow I'd fallen deeper into their trap. Now I was the villain in their story, and they'd planted doubt in the one person who mattered most to me. For 2 weeks, Mia barely spoke to me. She went to her parents' house alone, came back with red eyes and new doubts. I threw myself into work, spending long hours editing in my studio, waiting for the storm to pass. Then a package arrived. No return address, just my name scrawled across the top in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a note. You should see this. Lauren. Lauren was Nathan's wife, Mia's sister-in-law. The drive contained video files, home security footage from Richard and Margaret's house. The timestamps showed the night of the dinner. There was Margaret in the kitchen, clearly adding something to a drink. There was me entering, taking the glasses. There was Richard drinking from the tampered glass. But there was more. Footage from after we'd left. Margaret screaming at Richard, blaming him for drinking from the wrong glass. Richard yelling back, "This isn't the first time you've done something like this." The next file was from 2 days later, Margaret and Richard arguing in their living room about me. "He knows what you did," Richard said. "So what?" Margaret replied. "It's his word against mine. Mia will never choose him over family. And if she does, she's not the daughter I raised." Margaret's voice turned icy. "Don't worry. I've already started talking to her about their marriage problems, planting seeds. By the time I'm done, she'll be filing for divorce and thinking it was her idea." I shut my laptop, hands shaking. This wasn't just about me. This was a systematic effort to control Mia's life, to isolate her from anyone who didn't fit their vision. And they'd been doing it for years. I called Lauren immediately. "Why did you send this?" "Because they did the same thing to me when I married Nathan," she said quietly. "They tried to break us up for 2 years, said I wasn't good enough. It almost worked." "Why didn't you tell us?" "Nathan doesn't know," she admitted. "He idolizes his dad, believes everything he says. I've tried to tell him, but he thinks I'm paranoid. I just couldn't watch them do it to someone else." The next day, I got a text from Richard. "We should talk man to man, no wives." I met him at his country club, where he was waiting in a private room sipping whiskey. "Ethan," he began, "families are complicated. My wife can be overprotective, but she means well." "Drugging someone means well?" I asked. He waved a hand dismissively. "A misunderstanding. Margaret takes medication for stress. She probably mixed up the glasses." "I have the security footage, Richard." His face turned cold. "What do you want? Money? I always knew you married Mia for financial reasons." "I want you both to leave us alone," I said. "Stop trying to convince Mia I'm not good enough. Stop interfering in our marriage." Richard leaned forward. "You think this is the first time we've dealt with someone like you? People who want to take advantage of our family?" He laughed. "Mia will come home where she belongs. She always does. Ask her about Ryan. Ask her about the fiancé before you." I felt a chill. What are you talking about? Mia was engaged before she met you. Nice guy, software engineer. We didn't like his politics. Took us 6 months to convince her he was wrong for her. She broke it off, came home crying to Daddy. He smiled. History repeats, son. On the drive home, I called Mia's college roommate, Emma. What do you know about Ryan? Oh, God, she said. He was perfect for her, but her parents convinced her he was cheating, planted fake texts. He tried to tell her the truth, but by then, she didn't trust him. The pattern was clear now. This wasn't just about me. It was about control, complete control over their daughter's life, and they'd done it before. I didn't confront Mia right away. Instead, I gathered more evidence. I reached out to Ryan, who was hesitant, but sent me old emails showing how her parents had undermined their relationship. I contacted other ex-boyfriends, old friends of Mia's who'd mysteriously drifted away. A pattern emerged. Anyone who encouraged Mia's independence was pushed out. Lauren provided more security footage of Richard and Margaret discussing their plans for us. Once they divorce, we'll convince her to move back home, Richard said in one clip. She can work at the foundation, meet suitable men. I compiled everything onto a single drive. I invited Nathan and Lauren over for dinner without telling Mia. I was about to shatter her family's image. Over dessert, I connected my laptop to our TV. There's something you both need to see, I said. For the next hour, we watched the footage. Mia sat motionless, her face pale. Nathan kept shaking his head, muttering, "That's not my parents." When it was over, Mia turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed you to see for yourself," I said. "All of it. Not just what they did to me, but what they've been doing to you your entire life." Nathan stood up furious. You've edited these videos. My parents wouldn't do this." Lauren touched his arm. "They did it to us too, Nathan. Why do you think they suddenly started liking me after we had Caleb? Because a grandchild meant they had leverage." The color drained from Nathan's face. "You never told me." "I tried," she whispered. "You wouldn't listen." Later that night, Mia crawled into bed beside me. "I need time to process this," she said softly. "But I believe you, and I'm sorry I doubted you." The next morning, Margaret called. Mia put her on speaker. "Darling, I was thinking you should come stay with us for a while," Margaret said brightly. "Your father and I are worried about you. Marriage is hard, and sometimes separation can give clarity." "Mom," Mia interrupted, "I've seen the videos." Silence. "What videos?" "The security footage of you spiking Ethan's drink, of you and Dad plotting to break up my marriage." Another pause. "Mia, whatever he's shown you has been manipulated. You know Ethan has always been jealous of our family." "Stop," Mia said firmly. "We're coming over tonight. All of us. Nathan, Lauren, Ethan, and me. We're going to talk about this as a family. No more lies." After she hung up, Mia turned to me. "They'll deny everything. They'll try to turn this around on you." I nodded. "I know. So what's our plan?" For the first time in weeks, I smiled. "I think it's time your parents met the real me. The one who doesn't just shoot videos, but knows how to tell a story." That night, we arrived at Richard and Margaret's house with my camera equipment. Nathan and Lauren were already there, sitting stiffly in the living room. Richard seemed confident. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I interrupted, setting up my tripod. "I'm documenting this conversation for the family archives." Margaret objected immediately. "This is private family business." "Exactly," I agreed. "Family business. And I'm family, even though you've tried very hard to change that." For the next 2 hours, we laid it all out. The drink, the manipulation, Ryan, the other ex-boyfriends, the pattern that had shaped Mia and Nathan's entire lives. Richard and Margaret denied everything, called me unstable, manipulative. But with each denial, I played another clip, showed another email. Their faces grew paler, their denials weaker. Finally, Mia stood up. I love you both. You're my parents. But what you've done is unforgivable. You don't get to control my life anymore. Nathan nodded. We're adults. We choose our own partners, our own paths. Margaret started crying, not from remorse, but from losing control. Richard looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe his children were defying him. As we prepared to leave, I handed Richard a USB drive. This contains everything. The footage, the emails, the testimonies. It's yours to keep. What's that supposed to mean? He asked suspiciously. It means I'm not going to ruin your reputation by sharing this with anyone else. That would hurt Mia, and I'd never do that. I paused. But if you ever try to interfere in our marriage again, if you ever try to manipulate Mia or speak against me, copies will go to every member of your country club, your business partners, and your precious social circle. For the first time since I'd met him, Richard looked at me with something resembling respect. I underestimated you. Yes, I said simply. You did. 6 months passed. Mia and Nathan started therapy to work through the damage their parents had caused. Margaret and Richard kept their distance, sending occasional texts but respecting the boundaries we'd set. Then over the holidays, they invited us all to dinner. A fresh start, the invitation read. Mia wanted to go. They're still my parents, she said, and they're trying. I agreed, but I wasn't naive enough to think they'd change. When we arrived, everything seemed normal. Margaret had prepared a feast. Richard was charming, asking about my latest projects with what seemed like genuine interest. After dinner, Richard invited me into his study. I have a proposition for you, he said, pouring me a bourbon. I've been thinking about your career. Videography has been good to you, but have you considered diversifying? I could bring you into my firm, junior partner track. The salary would be substantial. I took the glass but didn't drink. Why would you do that? Your family, he said smoothly, and I respect how you handled the unpleasantness. You protected my daughter while standing your ground. That's what a real man does. His smile tightened when I set the glass down untouched. I appreciate the offer, but no. Ethan, be reasonable. This is an olive branch, a way for us to move forward. No, I repeated. It's another attempt at control. You can't buy me, Richard, and you can't stand the fact that Mia loves me exactly as I am. Don't be a fool, he hissed, dropping the facade. Everyone has a price. I stood up. That's where you're wrong, and that's why you'll never understand your daughter. I walked back to the dining room where Margaret was showing Mia old photo albums. Look at these, she was saying. You were so happy when you lived at home. Mia caught my eye across the room. She could tell from my expression that something had happened. I gave a slight nod and she stood up. Mom, Dad, she announced, I have something to tell you. Everyone turned to her. We're having a baby, Ethan and I. I'm 3 months pregnant. The shock on their faces was real. Margaret recovered first, rushing to hug her daughter with tears in her eyes. Richard approached more slowly, glancing between Mia and me. Congratulations, he said stiffly. Thank you, I replied, then lowered my voice so only he could hear. This child will never be a pawn in your games. I promise you that. His face hardened, but he nodded once. He understood the message. As we drove home that night, Mia squeezed my hand. They'll never change, will they? No, I said honestly, but they'll have to accept that we have. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from Richard's attorney. Inside was the deed to our rental house. They'd bought it outright, and legal documents establishing a trust fund for our unborn child. No note, no conditions, no strings, just the transfer of assets. It wasn't an apology. Richard wasn't capable of that. But it was an acknowledgement, maybe the only one he could give, that we'd won. Our daughter was born in spring, We named her Nora after my grandmother. When Margaret and Richard came to the hospital, they brought gifts but kept a respectful distance. They cooed over the baby, took photos, and left without offering parenting advice or financial lectures. Months passed, and our relationship with them settled into something resembling normalcy. They never apologized for what they'd done, but they stopped trying to control Mia's life or undermine my career. One evening, as I was editing footage in my studio, Mia came in, holding Nora. "My mom called," she said. "She wants us to come for Christmas." I looked up from my laptop. "What do you want to do?" "I think we should go," she replied, "but with conditions. We stay at a hotel, not their house. We leave when we want to leave. No unsupervised time with Nora." I nodded. "Sounds reasonable." She sat down beside me, bouncing the baby gently. "You know, I used to think success meant making my parents happy, getting their approval, meeting their expectations." She looked down at our daughter, then back at me. "Now I know it's about making choices I can be proud of, standing by the people I love." 2 weeks before Christmas, a large envelope arrived from Richard. Inside was a glossy annual report for his company. My videos were featured throughout. Mountain landscapes, employee interviews, drone shots, the work I'd done on my own terms without his interference. There was a brief note. "Hired the best videographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy. R." It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. It was something else. Respect, maybe. An acknowledgement that I was successful on my own terms, not his. I didn't call to thank him. We both understood this wasn't about gratitude. It was about recognizing the new boundaries, the new reality. That spring, I opened my own video production studio in downtown Boulder. At the grand opening, Mia stood beside me, Nora on her hip. My parents drove in from Montana, and friends and clients filled the space, admiring the projects I'd created over the years. Richard and Margaret came too, toward the end of the evening. They didn't stay long. Margaret held Nora briefly under Mia's watchful eye. Richard shook my hand, nodded at the videos with what seemed like genuine approval, and left without making any suggestions about how I should run my business. As we locked up that night, Mia asked, "Do you think they've changed?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally, "but they've accepted that they can't change us. And sometimes that's enough." Later, as we sat on our porch, watching the stars come out over the Rockies, Nora asleep in her crib upstairs, I realized something I'd never fully articulated before. I hadn't won by playing Richard and Margaret's game. I'd won by refusing to play it at all. I'd stood my ground, protected what mattered, and built my life according to my own definition of success. Not with schemes or manipulation, but with honesty and quiet persistence. In the end, that was the most satisfying revenge of all. Living well on my own terms, with the family I love beside me.